Hello and welcome to the Rotoworld Baseball Show. I'm your host Eric Samulski, joined by my co-host Scott Pianowski. We've been back and forth a few times this summer, Scott, but it's nice to be back in the saddle again. How are you doing?
Doing great. Just had a few days of final vacation before we step into the craziness of all the sports colliding, right? And we get baseball pennant races. Hockey's not far off. Obviously, the NFL season is coming, and we have some exciting news that we'll duck in about that. Some promos we're doing with Yahoo and NBC, and NBA. It feels like they just played the Olympics, but they're not far away. There's some great golf tournaments going on with the Tour Championship. So we're always in season here, Eric, and it's great to be talking sports, but really baseball with you.
Yes, and there are tons of seasons, and we are weirdly involved in all of them. But yes, we're going to focus on baseball today. We are now about a month away from the end of the season. So what Scott and I are going to try to focus on here is a little bit of like buy or sell or ignore on guys that are streaking or cold over the last month or so. Trying to help you with some pickups, or I think also importantly for this time of year, help you decide who to cut. Some guys who are maybe name brands who we've been afraid to move on from. But it might be the time of year to say, you know what, I need X, Y, and Z to get over the hump. And if this player isn't giving it to me, then I need to move on. So we're going to try to help you with those decisions. And then as we've been doing for a while in our midweek pods, we're going to, rank the streamers at the end of the show. Just quickly give you our picks for streamers on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of this week to try to help you either win your head-to-head matchups or make some pickups. We can help you in your Roto leagues as well. Scott, the big news story at the top, which we'll go real quick. On Monday, Dylan Crews made his debut for the Washington Nationals. Obviously, it's a big story. Crews is not exactly the type of player prospect that James Wood is, but there is some 5 category upside here. Not as much power as James Wood, but was showing decent contact gains. He hit second against a lefty on Monday, and then hit 7th against a righty on Tuesday. So I get the sense that that's kind of how they're going to play it. He'll start every day. He'll hit up in the order against lefties and down in the order against righties. In what type of leagues are you actually looking to add Dylan Crews in redraft formats?
Yeah, I thought he was maybe borderline in 12-teamers, and then you would certainly look to add him in anything deeper than that. Washington has not been afraid to throw its young players into key roles right away. They obviously haven't been shy about doing that with Wood. And even though Crews didn't have the same prospect pedigree at the time of his call-up, he was the 2nd overall pick in the draft 2023. The big debate was him or Wyatt Langford. Did Crews go before Langford because of signability and all that? I look at Crews, he reminds me just a little bit of Jackson Merrill, maybe with a little bit less pop, but it's that balanced player profile that you talked about. And Bill James said many years ago that players who are good at a lot of things often tend to be underrated, and players who are specialists and great at one thing tend to be sometimes a little bit overrated. I think sometimes Merrill's been a really good hit this year in an up and down season for rookies. He's a cornerstone to one of my keeper league teams, so I have a soft spot for him. I think Crews is eventually going to be one of those players you're going to look at. He's not going to overwhelm you with any one skill, but you can be like, well, he's good at a lot of different things, and that makes him a useful fantasy prospect.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about this on the blurbs for Rotoworld, right? That there were nice contact gains for him this year. There were, he went hitless in his first game, had 1 hit in the second game. He has made good swing decisions this year, was hitting 272, 13 homers, 25 steals across AA and AAA. Again, this is his first full pro season, right? So there are going to be ups and downs. We've seen guys like Kobe Mayo with, a lot longer minor league track records and probably higher highs struggle off the bat. So I think we have to expect that with Crews as well. Obviously, the 25 steals this year are nice because even if he's not hitting, balls over the fence early on, he could still give you some category juice in steals as well. I think, if you have the spot for like an upside stash, go for it. Because, you're rolling the dice and you're hoping he hits the ground running. There are some outfielders we're going to talk about later who are boring veterans, but are maybe better bets for like immediate production. And so I think it depends on are you sitting comfortably in your league right now and all you want is consistent production? You maybe don't want Dylan Crews. Do you kind of need to throw a Hail Mary to get to first or second in your league? If you do, maybe that's a situation where you take a gamble on Dylan Cruz, because if he doesn't produce right away, you're not really in a different place than you were before. But if he does kind of get to his 80th or 90th percentile, outcome, then maybe that makes a major difference for you. So it does depend on your setup. Negative news was Nick Lodolo heading to the IL with sprained middle finger. The Cubs basically said that he's been dealing with this issue since his last injury, which was a blister on his finger. And so that kind of maybe explains the poor performance. Lodolo mentioned that the sprained middle finger was impacting his curveball grip, which is impacting his curveball performance. He was somebody who's like Sierra and xFIP over the last month, far better than his actual ERA. So look, sprained finger, it's his pitching finger, so we don't really know if he's going to be the minimum IL stint. Maybe he comes back in 2 weeks and you get like 2 starts from Lodolo to end the year. Is that enough for you in like an NFBC format with no IL to hold him on your roster?
I would only hold him in a very specific situation if you needed strikeouts and if your ratios were nowhere near anybody else. I mean, this guy, career ERA is in the mid 4s. It's in the high 4s. This year, it was over 6 last year, albeit in just a few starts. We're always tantalized by the strikeouts, right? I mean, he's just one of those guys who strikes out players by the ton, but he walks too many. He's a little bit homer friendly. It's just he's a fantasy tease, right? I know that his component stats say his ERA is a little bit misleading, but whatever. I mean, his FIP this year is still 3.95. That's not good enough. So you'd have to have a very specialized fit for your. Generally, when any pitcher gets hurt this late in the season, I kind of write them off. It's only a finger injury. It's not the elbow, the shoulder, the forearm, the stuff that we would really worry about. It's something that should heal and be fine. But you need to be. He's a specialty strikeout play only. That's the only consideration I would give for rostering him.
Can I maybe give you a tiebreaker piece of information? I just looked up what his projected starts were. Okay. Obviously, this changes because he's on the IL. But if he were to just return to his rotation spot, his last 2 starts are against the Braves and the Guardians. Those are probably not starts where you would want to pitch him, and especially coming off an injury like that too.
The only good thing that could happen is maybe with that last start with the Guardians, maybe they're locked into playoff position and they roll out like that spring training lineup or something. But even then, that's something you could make that decision in the final week. I bet if you don't add him or if you drop him, he's just going to sit in a little corner, ignored, because like, oh, he's a hurt pitcher. No, when everybody does their free agent searches for their bidding, they're not going to see a player who's hurt. They're just going to ignore. It's like an illegal move in chess. You don't even consider it. So I just leave him on the wire. And then if we find out that Cleveland is sending their JV team, and even if Lodolo comes back, I mean, who's to say he doesn't throw 4 innings, 80, 57, 65 pitches, whatever. Okay, fine. That's this day of. Every starting pitcher is going to stay in with a lead to try to get the win. Everything. Teams just don't play like that anymore.
Right. Especially the Reds aren't going to be in contention, so they don't really need to do that.
Right. He's still a young pitcher who's considered part of their future. So I would think they'd probably be cautious with him. Again, I'm not saying forever. No, I'm just saying that it would have to be a very special set of circumstances. So just leave him on the wire, and if those circumstances come up, we can revisit.
Agreed. On Tuesday, the Orioles put Ryan Mountcastle on the IL. He had with a left wrist injury. They've been giving him treatment, and Brandon Hyde, the manager, said that the treatment he didn't respond to the treatment as well as they'd hoped. His quote is, "It's going to be a lot of treatment here over the next week. Timetable of that, I don't know. I'm staying optimistic that when the IL stint is over, the days are over, he's able to join us." So that would be 10 days. If you take I'm optimistic, it doesn't make us feel real good about that being in 10 days. So you could be looking at 2 to 3 weeks without Mountcastle. The Orioles are in a pennant battle. So if he's healthy, they're going to want him back in the lineup. I know he is not like a uber talented player, but hitting 265 with a 730 OPS of the year, he's been a regular starter for the Orioles. So obviously if you can hold, that's fine. My other question to you is, it looks like Eloy Jimenez is going to be the regular DH now for the Orioles, with Ryan O'Hearn playing first base against righties now that Mountcastle is out. Both O'Hearn and Jimenez are on the waiver wire in a lot of leagues. O'Hearn has been a regular starter against righties all year, so this doesn't really change his value. But does this make you at all interested in Eloy?
I mean, he's slugging 349 this year. I don't know what happened to Eloy Jimenez. I know he's hurt a lot of times, but he's 27. It feels like he's 35. He's only with Baltimore. He's got 1 walk and 14 strikeouts, even though he's hitting 300. The OPS is terrible. He's not hitting for any power. I would love to see Eloy Jimenez rocking the ball again, but I'm not going to bet on him.
Yeah, I agree with you on that as well. Let's see. Oh, can't believe this has made it to the news, but it made it to the news as another potential pickup. But Javy Baez has been transferred to the 60-day IL. His season is over. Since that has happened, Trey Sweeney has become the regular starter at shortstop for the Tigers. Look, this is a guy who was a 251 career minor league hitter, has not been electric, was striking out 27% of the time in AAA with the Dodgers before coming over to the Tigers, but did hit 381 in 11 games in AAA. On the year, he has 15 homers and 20 steals in 107 minor league games. He's only hitting 192 in 8 games for the Tigers. Are there any formats outside of AL only where you would consider picking up Trey Sweeney now that he seems likely to be the starter for the Tigers the rest of the way?
Yeah, it would have to be probably a 15 team and up, a deeper league where any at-bats have a currency. Although I will say this with Sweeney. I know people thought maybe the Tigers didn't get enough in the Flaherty deal. I'm trying to figure out why the Yankees gave up so quickly on Sweeney. I mean, he was a first-round pick, and they basically gave him away to the Dodgers for 2 guys who I don't think they have any great hopes for. And maybe Flaherty is a rental anyway. I mean, they knew that he had to be traded at the deadline probably for the shape of the Tigers roster. It didn't make any sense to keep him, but why not? He's 24. First round pedigree. As you said, he had the power and speed this year. He's striking out too much, but anything is going to look better than Javy Baez. It's funny. I tweeted something about Javy Baez about how frustrating it was to watch him play and how he's a sunk cost and you should just forget about the contract and maybe just move on. And the week I tweeted that, I think he hit 3 or 4 home runs that week. And one of the home runs he hit when I was in attendance. And I'm like, okay, I fixed Javy Baez. I said something a little negative about him on Twitter, and here he comes. But it's just, I don't know what went wrong with it. I know Javy Baez, even at his best, would swing at anything. It feels like his career might be over now. And I take no joy in saying that. But yeah, Sweeney, maybe he's a little bit post-hype. 15 and up, I'd be okay with it. For the shallower leagues, you basically put him on the watch list and see if he gets hot. You'd probably need some production before you'd make an ad, but he's at least somebody to be aware of.
Yeah. We got another rookie shortstop to be aware of. A's shortstop Jacob Wilson is back off the IL. He started on Tuesday. So are you more likely to add Jacob Wilson? He was kind of like the hot flavor of the month when he was first called up because he was, absolutely torching the minor leagues in terms of batting average, hurt his hamstring in his first game. Are you more inclined to pick up Jacob Wilson than you would be somebody like Trey Sweeney?
Yeah, probably. I mean, the AAA numbers read like a misprint, right? I mean, he struck out 15 times in 53 games, had almost equal walks and strikeouts, 433, 474, 668 slash, and he's still just 22. A lot of times when you see guys do stuff like that, you're like, okay, is he old for the level or something like that? That's not the case. He comes up, he gets hurt right away. I think Oakland, and I know a lot of crazy things are going on with Oakland. We don't know where the team's headed. There's just so much chaos in the front office, but you would think they would just leave Wilson alone for the next 5 weeks and see if they have a piece here. I don't know that he's going to have the category juice that we want, but batting average is a stat too.
It is. It is a stat. It's an important stat. It's a stat we forget about. So yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you, even though Sweeney has some like minor 5 category upside. I would rather go with Wilson in what is a better lineup. I mean, I don't know that coming into the year we thought we'd say that about the A's lineup, but like that is a better lineup right now. Something not on the rundown, but it is your team, so I'll just ask you because we're talking about the Tigers. Spencer Torkelson has come back. He's hitting fine. He's hitting 308 since coming back, 2 home runs. I'm just curious if you are willing to buy back in on Spencer Torkelson. And in what league types you would be willing to buy back in on Spencer Torkelson.
The funny thing is, I didn't see anything encouraging about what he was doing in the minors, and now he's come back and he's been productive. He's still striking out too much. I looked at some of the leagues where I cut Torkelson. I didn't have a ton of Torkelson, but I had 1 or 2 shares, and I think he's been already added in those groups. So it's one of those things where if you can get him at your price, the $0 bid or the $1 bid, I'm okay with that. But if you don't get him, it's not the end of the world. Detroit's still got a lineup with a lot of holes in it. For every Riley Green, they have 2 or 3 guys you're never going to consider rostering. I'm just glad to see him up and producing again, but I'm afraid there's still too much swing and miss here. And Detroit's curse was that the years that they had high picks, a number 1 overall picks, they ended up with people like Torkelson and Casey Mize. And it seems like the year the Orioles had number 1 pick, it was like, oh, okay, we have Adley Rutschman, who's going to be like the best catcher in the American League for the next 8 years or something like that. So I think Detroit was a little bit unlucky that they didn't have slam dunks when they had that number 1 overall pick. I'd like to see Torkelson get his career on track, and in a couple of, the heck with it. Why not have one? Sometimes you just want to get one share of a guy, so if something happens, at least you're not locked out of it. But he's still striking out way too much.
Yeah, and I will say, I had to pick up corner infield in a few leagues where, I lost Austin Riley, and I was just kind of casting a wide net for any corner infielder, not just like a third baseman. And it's dark days out there.
Very dark
for corner infielders. The best corner infield options are also guys like Ernie Clement, who are like second base, shortstop. Like they're not like those power hitting corner infield guys that we're used to seeing on the wire.
Hey,
I just
Ernie Clement is like Ben Zobrist, peak Ben Zobrist at this point.
Listen,
you will not get Ernie Clement off my rosters. I need him. He's starting for me every day.
Ernie is my guy. So
Ernie's my guy too. You move him all over the place. Yeah.
When I used to run a college wood bat summer league in the Perfect Game Collegiate Baseball League, the Albany Dutchman, no longer in existence, but thank you for 13 years, Albany Dutchman. And my responsibility for the team as the assistant GM was putting the roster together. And I signed Ernie when he was a high school senior because I talked to the UVA coach, and our team was allowed to have 2 incoming freshmen, and they said we've got a local kid, we think he's really good. And, I think he'd benefit from playing in the league for, against college pitchers. And so Ernie played for us just after his senior year of high school. Great kid. And, great kid at the time. Obviously, he's like an adult man now. But, he was a great kid on and off the field. We've been rooting for his success for a while. He was an up and down guy for a while, with some of the other organizations he's been with. And so it's super cool to see him having the success that he has. He's a tremendously hard worker. And so it's nice to see that kind of pay off for him.
What an awesome story. I said he was my guy. He literally is your guy. That's not only is that Clement story great, but that you running that organization in that Wooden Bats League, which I didn't know is fantastic. There is so much great backstory with Eric that comes out during the podcast. One of my favorite stories of the season.
We parse it out through.
Yes.
Let's end with one more that I want to just have you talk about. We have been pounding the table for Joey Bart here for weeks because he's been playing really well. Really unfortunate that a guy who was like the next big thing, a catcher for the Giants, finally seemed to find it, and now he's hurt again. There's no timeline right now. For the Pirates are saying he's starting to throw, but there's no timeline for when he's going to return. They've called up Henry Davis in the meantime. Henry Davis started the first game against a lefty. Yasmani Grandal is starting today against a righty. That might kind of be the way that it works. Obviously, if Henry Davis is only starting against lefties, you're probably not picking him up. But let's say Henry Davis starts to get a couple more starts here and there. Are you willing to Charlie Brown try to kick the football again, or are you done?
Well, I'm not interested. And the reason why is because I think the catcher, and I put out some Joey Bart promotion maybe a week ago and just mentioned how many of the top 12 catchers this year are still rostered under 50%. And even now, if you lost Bart, who's been really good to us, and as you mentioned, he was playing at first base, getting DH time, so he's basically in the lineup every day. If you lost him, I'm just looking at the best free agents in leagues that are under 25% roster. There's a bunch of guys who are playing a lot, who are producing a catcher. This has not been a tough position to fill. So rather than tell myself a story that maybe Henry Davis is going to figure it out, there's guys who are already productive who I think are easier to add. So Henry Davis is nowhere near my radar right now.
Agreed. And we'll talk about some of those guys later if you need somebody at catcher. A couple quick hitters. Christian Walker took batting practice on Monday, inching closer to a return for the Diamondbacks, which is great news if he's on your fantasy team. We talked about how there are very limited corner infield options. Jason Hayward is signing with the Houston Astros because nobody knows when Kyle Tucker is going to play baseball again. The Astros keep saying early September for Tucker. He still, as of Monday, had not yet started running the bases, which he needs to do because it's a shin injury, right? He needs to be able to run and sprint before he goes out on a rehab assignment we have no idea when that's going to happen. Just today, the Mariners activated JP Crawford off the IL. So for those of you in deeper leagues, JP Crawford is back to most likely hit leadoff and play every day for the Mariners. Joe Ryan was moved to the 60-day IL, so his regular season is over. If you were holding on to him in any sort of redraft league, his regular season is done. Hopefully, they still have some hope he can make it back for the playoffs. Jared Jones was activated off the IL, had a rough start against the Cubs yesterday, looked pretty good in his rehab starts. I'm not too concerned about, first start off the IL with Jared Jones there. So I'm still trying to get him. I had him on my bench in a lot of leagues, and I kind of do that with pitchers in their first start back. So, but I could see myself throwing him right back into the lineup next week. Xavier Edwards was placed on the IL, which is unfortunate if you picked him up and were using the stolen base upside. It allowed Griffin Conine to get called up. That's just a cool little, hey, another former MLB player's son getting a shot. Xavier Edwards, we don't yet know what his timeline is, but we expect the Marlins are going to try to get him back on the field before the end of the year. The Tigers called up one of their former top prospects, Ty Madden. You may see the name value and think I have to get him in my lineups. Just know that Ty Madden was having a really horrible year this year for the Tigers, and a lot of the Tigers beat writers are suggesting that he was called up right now because the team wants to see him face MLB pitching to decide if he's going into the offseason as a starter or a reliever, because there is some thought that his fastball slider combo would play up really nicely out of the bullpen. That's interesting to hear because the Tigers kind of have an option at closer. And so if they do feel like Ty Madden is better out of the bullpen, there's a path for him in 2025 to be an impact reliever for the Tigers. So just keep an eye on that. Speaking of impact relievers, Liam Hendriks could return as early as the end of next week for the Red Sox. He is not going to close, right? That's still Kenley Jansen, but the Red Sox bullpen could desperately use him. And there's a chance he picks up a spare save here or there if he kind of works into high leverage innings. And if you're in keeper leagues, he is signed to a 2-year deal. If he looks good at the end of this year, if he's back, there is a very, very strong likelihood that Liam Hendriks is the closer for the Red Sox at the start of the 2025 season. So if you have an opportunity in leagues to pick him up, that is something to think about. Some minor league guys, just to note, Chase DeLauder is on fire for the Guardians in AAA right now. Rosters will expand soon. And the Guardians offense has really been struggling, in particular in the outfield, where Lane Thomas is giving them nothing. So Chase DeLauder could be a pickup with rosters expanding. Jacob Misiorowski has been used primarily out of the bullpen for the Brewers and is absolutely on fire for AAA for them. Unfortunately, he's probably going to come up as a reliever, but that is also just a name to keep in mind for the Brewers. And then last thing, which is not fantasy relevant, but the Cardinals designated Sean Armstrong for assignment. Sean Armstrong was the return at this year's trade deadline for Dylan Carlson, and he is already on waivers. So the Cardinals, yes, Dylan Carlson probably needed a change of scenery, but they traded him away for a reliever that they designated for assignment less than a month after trading away Dylan Carlson, who still has, I believe, 2 years of control after this year. So just remember that maybe next year when Dylan Carlson is a starter for the Rays and you're thinking about what did the Cardinals get for him? Nothing is the answer to that question. They got nothing.
So just a couple of rebuttals to all that. Man, the Xavier Edwards injury kills me. He was stealing the base just about every day. I am using IL's spot for him, hoping that he does come back, and because he's, again, top of the lineup, hitting for a great average and can steal a base pretty much anytime he wants it. I think he might have gotten hurt stealing a base on Friday. So that was a big sting for me on a bunch of my rosters. Jason Hayward, I have a nickname for him. It's infield practice, because I feel like when I think of Jason Hayward, I think of him grounding out to second base routinely. Mm-hmm. It's just so weird. He came up, he was 20 years old. He looked great early in his career, and just the arc of his career was so strange. And let me just ask you a question about, you mentioned the Guardians. They're getting nothing out of Lane Thomas. It gives me two questions to you. One, is Lane Thomas a cut right now? Because I think in some leagues I don't want to play him anymore. And once you don't want to play somebody, you might as well cut him. And the Royals have caught the Guardians in the AL Central. I don't think it's the juiciest, maybe wild card / pennant race season that we've had. A lot of this stuff is already decided, but that's really exciting. The Royals, remember, they were worse than the White Sox last year, right? This is a fun team. Bobby Witt, it's going to be a great debate next year. Who do you take first overall? Do you take Shohei? Do you take Bobby Witt? Do you take Aaron Judge? There's a lot to talk about and break down there, but the Royals are fun. I'd like to see the Royals do it. Just it's a fresh story. So are we cutting Lane Thomas, and who are we picking in the AL Central?
I'm still picking the Guardians. I'm biased, obviously, but I believe in Vogt. I believe in their ability to turn that team around a little bit. I believe in the pieces on the Guardians. I am okay moving on from Lane Thomas in a 12-team league. I'm trying to hold in a 15. He was acquired at the deadline also because he has another year of control. They view him as a starting outfielder next year, so I don't think they're going to take him out of the lineup. So in a 15-team league, I'm willing to bench him because I think that the Guardians will continue to try to let him get back in the groove a little bit. I think it is really detrimental if you bench him now and then say, hey, you're our starting outfielder next year. Like, I just don't know if that's going to happen. However, in a 12-team league, like even before the trade, I think he was hitting like 250 for the Nationals. A lot of the value was coming in his speed. And the Guardians will run. So if he gets on base, he will run. He just has to get on base. And that's where, like, in a 15-team league, I'm still willing to hold, for solid lineup context and good speed. But in shallower leagues, I think I can get that on the wire while he's struggling. So, I can move on.
Yeah, I think maybe the biggest thing is that he's not in today's lineup. And so that would be 1, 2, 3, 4 times in the last 9 days where he's actually not started. And I need guys playing in mixed leagues. And I realize, again, you have to sprinkle to taste. 10-team, you wouldn't be considering him. 15-team, maybe you have to hold him. But in that 12-team sweet spot, I need guys playing every day. And right now, the Guardians have spoken. They don't view him as a full-time player, whether he needs to get his mojo back, as you mentioned, team control. He's been really good player for me the last couple of years, the Washington years. But once I started to see that red X when I call up my roster in Yahoo and Lane Thomas isn't playing, and he becomes a chore for me now. I have to say, is Lane Thomas even in the lineup today? What's worse than you don't get to your lineup in time and you have somebody who's in your active lineup in a daily league and he's not starting? Mm-hmm. Really frustrating. So I think that's probably what pushed me over the cliff here.
Yeah. I get it. I see it. And I don't think you're going to really regret cutting Lane Thomas. So if you need to, go for it. We're going to get to some guys that you could pick up if you do cut Lane Thomas. Before we do that, though, fantasy football season just got better. $1 million better. Create or join a private Yahoo Fantasy League and enter the $1 million NBC sweepstakes. Plus, earn extra entries to win when players on your fantasy roster score a touchdown during an opening weekend game. On NBC or Peacock, download the redesigned Yahoo Fantasy app or go to NBCSports.com/fantasy-million to learn more. That's also a good tiebreaker if you're in your fantasy football draft and you're trying to figure out who should I draft. Well, if you're tied between two guys and one of them plays an opening weekend game on NBC or Peacock, that gives you an extra chance if you draft them to earn some more entries to win $1 million. That could be $1 million decision for you in your draft.
And by the way, they did a great job with the scheduling because they're all loaded offensive teams, right? The Ravens and Chiefs are playing in the opener. I think the Packers, Eagles, Lions, and somebody else. I mean, Lions and Rams, maybe. I think those are the 6 teams. You're going to want to draft players. It's really obvious. Draft fantasy football players from the really good offenses. Who doesn't want an Andy Reid offense, a Sean McVay offense? My colleague Dalton Del Don at Yahoo was saying the Lions at home are like Coors Field, where they're so good inside on the fast track and everything. So we know the Eagles score a bunch of points. Jordan Love, rising quarterback for the Packers, who was great in the second half last year and is one of my favorite targets. So you're going to want to draft those guys anyway. Why not make $1 million while you're doing it?
Agreed. All right, we're going to play a little buy, sell, ignore, which is basically I'm going to give you some hitters and pitchers who are either streaking or struggling in recent weeks, and you're going to tell me whether you're buying the hot streak, whether you're selling the player, just like get him off my roster, or whether we're just ignoring the recent stats and either leaving the player on the wire or holding him on your roster. It starts with a catcher because the 6th ranked hitter over the last 2 weeks is Miguel Amaya of the Cubs, who's hitting .421 with 3 home runs, 9 runs and 14 RBIs over his last 11 games. However, it goes back even farther with Amaya, who changed his swing at the beginning of July, is hitting .358 in 105 plate appearances with a .589 slugging percentage since changing his swing. It's 11.4% strikeout rate. It's 177 weighted runs created plus, 5 homers, 7 doubles. Are you buying what Miguel Amaya is selling?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, we're not looking for Mr. Right. We're looking for Mr. Right now, and he is the number 5 catcher in Yahoo value over the last month, and that one of the four guys in front of him is Joey Bart, who's hurt now, and you know, so if you missed out, if Bart was somebody you were playing, why not pivot to Amaya? And still just 25% rostered in Yahoo. So I mentioned how catcher was not the hardest solve this year because it seems like there's just a bunch of guys who are under rostered who are producing. So yeah, Amaya to me, and I like, maybe it's a false equivalency, but whenever somebody's producing and I could point to something, there's a technical change in his swing. I love that. That always is like a selling point for me.
That's what I was going to say, where it's not just hot streak. It's not just opponent. You know, they changed his swing. He had been using a leg kick his whole career. And they changed him to using a toe drag and getting away from the leg kick because they thought it would help him get his foot down earlier, which is why you're seeing like huge increases in exit velocity, bat speed, pull rate, because he's actually getting down early and able to turn on the ball. What I love, my favorite little anecdote from the whole story, is that he didn't know if he wanted to make the change because obviously, even though he's struggling, this is how he's swung his entire life. It got him to the major leagues. So why would I make the change? The assistant hitting coach, Juan Cabreja, texted Nelson Cruz because Nelson Cruz made a similar change. And Nelson Cruz basically said, what does he have to lose? He's hitting 186. And so they showed Miguel Amaya the text message from Nelson Cruz, and he basically, that helped push him over the edge of like, all right, what do I have to lose? And it's worked out. And so I just love that as an anecdote. I love it as a story. And I love Miguel Amaya as a pickup. So go get him if you can.
Can Nelson Cruz send a text message to Joey Gallo, who for some reason is still in baseball, even though he hits like 157 every year?
Yeah, maybe. What does he have to lose by retiring?
Our own Adam Wise is a Washington fan. He deserves better than Joey Gallo. Let's get that fixed.
He does, yeah. Andres Chaparro, though. I like Andres Chaparro in Washington. Not on our list here, but hope he gets some regular playing time. Corner infielder who is on our list is Ramon Urias. Ramon Urias, listen, I am one of the group that has been like, I can't believe we're going to this guy as the regular third baseman instead of Kobe Mayo. But, you know, Ramon Urias is delivering. He is the 14th ranked hitter overall in Yahoo over the last 2 weeks. He's hitting 306 with 4 home runs, 7 runs scored, 13 RBIs, and 1 steal over the last 13 games. Are you buying what your Ramon Urias is selling? And I'll just add the kicker that he plays in Colorado this weekend.
Yeah, it's a couple of nice kickers, right? The schedule fits. He covers first base, second base, third base in Yahoo. He's tied to the Baltimore lineup, gives him some buoyancy. It's another Mr. Right Now thing. I would cut Urias in a second if he hit any kind of a cold patch, but that's unlikely to happen with the schedule lining up. Sure. He's only rostered 11% of Yahoo too, so he's widely available. And, you know, for you and me losing Austin Riley, these are the types of players you have to consider.
For sure. Not only losing Austin Riley, on one team, I have Rafael Devers, who sat last night, Tuesday night, because he was managing shoulder soreness. And I realized at that point when I went to switch him out, because I'm in a Yahoo Daily Moves league, I didn't have a backup third baseman. And so in a situation like that, Ramon Urias, we have bi-weekly pickups. So we have pickups on Wednesday night.
Yep.
I am putting in bids for Ramon Urias tonight, because if I get him in Coors, I can use him just in the utility spot, corner infield spot. And if for whatever reason the Red Sox are resting Devers again, I throw Urias in there. But again, yeah, when he goes cold, he goes off my roster, but that's a great lineup to have a piece of, and I'm happy to do that.
And you want to have a couple of those rovers. We talked about Clement earlier, who's one of those players too. You want to like 1 or 2 players on your team who play 3 different positions, because it gives you the flexibility. So much of fantasy baseball is volume, is just getting the most opportunities in your league, getting as many at-bats as you can get. And that's going to help you in the counting stats. So you need a couple of these guys who can float anywhere they're needed.
Yeah, and that's why I love, like, if you're in a format like Yahoo, look at your starts, right? Go scroll down, look at like your starts by position, because a lot of leagues will have start limits, right? So you can't just like load up all season long. If your league has a starts limit, you start to see what positions you have the most starts left at. And make sure your roster is filled with guys who can fill in those spots. So if somebody's out for whatever reason, you're not taking zeros on any day. You're able every day to fill in somebody on that spot. That's, again, just figure out your league and try to make that work for you. Over the last 2 weeks, Pete Crow Armstrong is the 20th ranked hitter in Yahoo formats, hitting 297 in 12 games with 3 home runs, 8 runs scored, 9 RBIs, and 3 steals. Was once a super top ranked prospect for the Mets, elite defensive center fielder. But do we buy the offensive production? we're seeing right now from Pete Crow Armstrong?
I've been slow to pick him up in leagues, and I'm probably going to be slow to add him even now. As you love the defense because it marks a spot in the lineup, but they haven't moved him up at all. And because it's been such a rocky trajectory for his offense, I just think this is more of a blip than something that's likely to continue. I'm open-minded to him. I want to like PCA. I think I even like calling him PCA. I'm a little bit of a Cubs sympathizer too, but I'd like to see the team buy in a little bit more. He always bats ninth. There's a lot of strikeouts in this game. I've been slow to adopt to this, and if that beats me, I can be fine with that.
Yeah, I'll just say if you need speed, right? Everyday player has stolen 26 bases in 94 games at the major league level this year. So I don't really buy the full offensive output we're getting over the recent stretch. However, if I need speed, then I'm happy to take a flyer because listen, 22% strikeout rate. He's making consistent contact. So even if he is more of like a 250 hitter instead of this 290 version that we're getting from him recently, that's going to lead to stolen bases, and that's not going to kill me in batting average. But I don't think the power that we've seen right now is going to stick. He's a 20 homer, 15 to 20 homer full season guy. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just, hitting at the bottom of the order, those like counting stats are going to be hit or miss.
I wonder why he's not running more. He had that one game a couple days ago where he stole 3 bases, and over the last, I think, 16 games, he's only stolen 3 bases. They were all in one game. He's a plus base stealer. He's a really good athlete. I don't know what, and then I don't know. Teams are they've
it's
changed.
It's hard to steal bases when you're hitting home runs, Scott.
That's true. Yeah, home runs. Was it Smoltz? I forget what announcer said that home runs, or maybe Joe Morgan said this back in the day, that home runs kill your rally because nobody's on base now. It's like stop hitting home runs.
Yeah, you got to do it. You got to get the ball in play. Another outfield option is Ramon Laureano. This is what the Braves do. You take a guy who has been nothing for a few years. And Ramon Laureano has been great. He's the 26th ranked hitter in Yahoo formats over the last 2 weeks, hitting 347 in 13 games with 3 home runs, 7 runs scored, 7 RBIs and 2 steals. But it goes beyond that with Laureano. Since coming to the Braves in 42 games, he's hitting 301 with 20 runs scored, 15 RBIs and 3 steals. I have added Ramon Laureano in a few leagues. Are you also adding Ramon Laureano?
Yeah, he's the Eddie Rosario winner, right? He's just the recycled veteran. You've forgotten about him. He's still in the majors. Yeah, he's still in the majors. And I've been adding Laureano all over the place, power and speed. At one point, he was a really exciting player for Oakland. A lot of things went wrong, but he's been probably my most added player over the last 10 days.
Yeah, I love it. Listen, and I love the work they do at Roster Resource over on Fangraphs, so this is not a knock on them. But if you go to the page, he's on the bench, even though he has started the last 6 games, and Jared Kelenic has only started 2. I believe that has been a swap. Ramon Laureano is the starter in left field right now. Jared Kelenic is on the bench. Jared Kelenic will sometimes start against righties, though he didn't start against a righty on Tuesday. Ramon Laureano did. And so, yes, I think you'll see Ramon Laureano get the odd day on the bench against a righty when they're going to get Kelenic in the lineup. I just don't think it's going to be that often. Laureano's hitting 5th against lefties, hitting 7th against righties. He's hitting behind Marcell Ozuna and Matt Olson and Michael Harris. There will be RBI opportunities there. Again, if he turns into a pumpkin, you move on, but I'm buying Ramon Laureano for right now.
By the way, he's 16 straight starts and 19 out of 20. I'm eyeballing Baseball Reference right now. So he's an everyday player. They have basically said he's our left fielder some days. He's our right fielder some days. And I do think they've soured on Kelenic. And I just don't know what to do with that guy. I mean, I was down on him, and then I cut him in some leagues. He had a nice hot stretch in the middle of the year. And since then, I feel like he's hit like 185 since then. I
think it might be it. I mean, he's 25 years old now, which I know isn't really old, but is older for like a baseball prospect. We have a 370 game MLB sample of him being a 213 hitter with an over 30% strikeout rate. I think
he'll be in a different organization next year, or if he is with the Braves, he won't be a starter. I mean, he'll be their 4th outfielder. I think they're an organization that's thinking championship at the beginning of the year. He's just not good enough to really be on their roster as a key guy. He's only there now because so many people have gotten hurt. But as you talked about, they've moved away from him as a key piece, and Laureano's just better. Right? He does more things well. He's more reliable. They've done such a good job of recycling guys. Maybe they kind of thought that they could say the right
Do
thing
that
to
with Kelly.
Kelnick or coach him up or do whatever. But I think that's been a failed experiment. And again, Laureano, he's only, I think 9%, 10%, something like that rostered in Yahoo. He should be. I get it. Football's coming, people are going back to school and everything. I realize the engagement goes down a little bit, but he should be 25, 35, 40% rostered. I think that's a great opportunity for the people listening to get a productive outfielder who, as we talked about the last 3 weeks, he's an everyday player.
Yeah, I fully agree with you on that one. Last outfielder or last player, to who's on hot streak. Trevor Larnach is ranked the 43rd ranked hitter in Yahoo over the last 2 weeks. He's hitting 351 in 11 games with 3 homers, 7 runs, 10 RBIs, but he's actually had a really hot August. In 19 games in August, he's hitting 318 with those 3 home runs, 15 runs scored, 11 RBIs. Larnach will sit against lefties, though. So in what type of leagues could you see yourself adding Trevor Larnach, or would you not at all because he's just a part-time player?
Yeah, Minnesota, their team, and I realize part of it is because we always talk about the roster has a lot of injury attrition. It's hit this year. Plus they do platoon here and there. You just never know what the lineup's going to look like left and right. But so it has to be a daily moves league where you can maneuver it and maybe with a fair amount of bench spot, because if you only have a few bench spots, you just, that platoon guy kills you. But in certain maneuver, so he's a specialty play, but the good news is lately when he's been playing, he's batting second or third, mostly second.
Yeah, which is nice.
Still a lineup I like. Obviously, Buxton has finally gotten hurt after being healthy for most of the season, which opens up a playing spot and an outfield spot. What a shame, too. I went to a Twins game at Detroit, and watching Buxton play center field was one of my highlights of the season. He just moves like a gazelle. He's so graceful, and I was hoping this year he could play a full season. But Larnach is a chore. He's a responsibility you have to tend to, although for the most part, at least lefty, he's not playing. So, or he's going to be buried in the lineup occasionally. He'll play against the lefty. So I guess if you want to say in a weekly league, if you see a bunch, you need, what's the cutoff for you in a weekly league? Do you need 5 righty starts, 6 righty starts, something like that? If it's a 50-50 week, you don't play them, but just be aware.
5 would be ideal. 4 is on the fence.
Yep.
For me. And I will say, I just looked, they face 3 lefties next week.
There you go.
So Larnach is probably a pass for right now. You got to look ahead to the schedule and see if you can, scoop him up later. Some hitters, struggling hitters, might be, see if it's time to move on or not. Over the last, I went to a month for this because these are guys who I need longer than a 2-week sample to see if it's ready, if we should cut them. Yandy Diaz is the 295th ranked player over the last month. He is hitting 298 over 25 games, 2 home runs, 10 runs, 10 RBIs. We know he doesn't steal, and we know his power is not what we've wanted from Yandy Diaz. So now that he hits leadoff in a bad Rays lineup versus a good Rays lineup, does Yandy Diaz need to be on your roster?
You need to do what he does. He's a batting average guy who has a little bit of power, never runs at all. And Tampa Bay, I don't think there's a quality team. They're not great, but they're not terrible, right? They're not a bottom out team. I have almost no shares of their offense. I think part of it is because I talked about the chore of having to grind a lineup every day. Not only do I not know who's going to start, but then they're going to pinch hit and they're going to move guys around in defense. I just don't want to play somebody who may not start or may start and only get 3 at bats. Or in the case of Diaz, he never runs, right? The power is marginally. That one season last year, we hit the 22 home runs. He won the batting title, for crying out loud. And it's nice to see somebody actually winning a batting title, hitting over 300. It may not happen in the National League this year. It makes me a little bit nervous, but I'm kind of sick of the Rays. I get what they do. They're smart. They don't want to spend money. Their ballpark stinks, whatever. I don't have particular interest in Diaz because I like to ignore every Tampa Bay game if I can.
I have kept him in a few places, but yeah, I think if you don't need batting average, I could see moving on from Yandy Diaz. Xander Bogaerts, who we talked about being kind of out on when he was coming back from the fractured shoulder. He's the 323rd ranked player in Yahoo over the last month, hitting 263 in 26 games with 1 home run, 10 runs, 10 RBI, and 3 steals. He is still hitting in the middle of a good Padres lineup. Are you moving on from Xander Bogaerts?
I feel like I moved on a long time ago. Man, if you told me he was 35 or 36, I'd believe it. It's a skill erosion is really worrisome, albeit he's surrounded by a lot of good hitters in that San Diego lineup. I mentioned Merrill earlier as one of my favorite players this year, but I think he's like a league average hitter, maybe below that right now. I don't trust and what do you get? He needed, even in his salad days, a big selling point for him was the batting average. I'm not sure that's even is that going to offset the fact that he has almost no power anymore and he occasionally steals a base? His OPS plus is 91. His slugging is 366. Yeah, Xander Bogaerts, that contract is not going to age well. I guess he's 31 this season. It feels like he's 4 years older.
No notes. I agree with everything you said. We talked about the struggling Guardians lineup. Stephen Kwan is part of that. He's ranked as the 349th hitter in Yahoo formats over the last month. He's hitting 174 in 28 games with 2 home runs, 16 runs scored, though, 9 RBIs and 5 steals. Are you moving on from Stephen Kwan in any formats?
Yeah, I probably hold a guy like this because on-base skills and stolen base skills, although he only has 11 steals on the year, but he's run more lately, parked in the top of the lineup. This is what you get with Kwan. He's just been probably a little bit hit unlucky. I don't have that in front of me, but I would think with that outlier average in a player with this steady a profile and skill set, that's probably what's at play here. He gets a bat in front of Jose Ramirez, who's having another wonderful season. And man, when have you lost money on Jose Ramirez? What he's like the overlooked star because he's not Aaron Judge, he's not Acuna, he's not even like the spectacle of Julio Rodriguez or whatever, but so freaking good. But yeah, Stephen Kwan, this is just a blip. I would hold on to him. I feel the same way about Kwan as I did a month ago.
Yeah, and I think what's really important to note here too is like he's still hitting at the top of the lineup and he's still running. And it's just the Guardians lineup as a whole has really kind of dragged of late. We've seen him be a high batting average guy for a while. So I'm happy to hold on to Stephen Kwan too. If you don't need speed, then he loses a lot of value. But again, he has a lot of value in runs and potential value in batting average as well. So there are a lot of ways that he can help your team that I'm willing to hold on to. I'm less confident in Brandon Nimmo, who's ranked 458th over the last month. He's hitting 218 in 23 games with 2 home runs, 10 runs scored, 9 RBIs, and 2 steals. Are you holding on to Brandon Nimmo or moving on from Brandon Nimmo?
This one I'm worried about because I have a lot of Nimmo shares, and I've often made the case that he's an underrated modern player, right? Because he gets on base and he's got some power, but it's not overwhelming power. The Mets have been pretty patient with Nimmo. He was batting second or third most of the year, even through the slump. He's still batting third or fourth. So at least the playing time hasn't come down. I wonder I don't remember if he had a minor injury earlier this summer. I think he missed a couple of games early in July. I just wonder if maybe something's bothering him that we don't know about. We're going to find out after the season. Oh, my shoulder hasn't been right, or my wrist, after a certain swing I took in a game, my wrist hurt or whatever. I feel like maybe something's at work here, but the Mets haven't given up on him. I'm still reluctant. Here's what's happened with me, Eric, and a lot of my mixed league teams. A lot of times we're Lawrence Butler fans here. Okay. A lot of times it's coming down to, do I play Nimmo or Butler? Because Butler's been more productive lately. I'm just playing the better player, or maybe
has true 5 category upside too.
For sure. Ernie Clement, we talked about, he's been hot lately. Nimmo has become the either or final roster pick on a lot of nights. And until he turns it around, he's getting the thumbs down. I have not cut him though.
Yeah, I think in a 15-team league, I'm holding Nimmo because that everyday playing time. Listen, even since the second half, even though he's hitting 180 since the All-Star break, 25% strikeout rate, over a 13% walk rate. So he does still have that plate discipline that we like to see. The power is gone, but like, I don't know. I didn't really buy the 24 home runs from last year. I understand he has 18 this year, and so I might not have been right. But what I mean is, like, if I have Nimmo on my team, I wasn't counting on power out of him. And I also wasn't counting on speed out of him because I know he has 11 steals this year. He stole 3 last year and 3 the year before.
Hey, so 11 for 11, man. He's obviously been consulting with Ricky Henderson or maybe Davey Lopes, the great base running coach.
You wanted Nimmo for batting average and runs. Right. So if he's still hitting in the top third of the Mets lineup and still making good swing decisions, then I think you're still going to potentially get that. In a 12-team league, I might just move on because I think I can find guys who are doing that right now.
What you're going to get at the end of the season is the batting average won't be what you wanted, but he's going to be like 85 runs scored, 85 RBIs. He's going to probably hit 20 plus home runs, and he's got the double-digit stolen bases. He's basically going to be useful in 4 categories. So you have to respect him. And the Mets haven't given up on him. So, you would think with a slump like this, they might think, oh, okay, he's going to bat 7th for a while. They haven't done that.
Yeah, and that's that. A vote of confidence from the team is always nice. You know who else keeps playing is Ryan McMahon. But he's hitting 385. Sorry, he's the 588th ranked hitter in Yahoo over the last month. He's hitting 181 in 23 games with 2 homers, 9 runs scored, 11 RBIs, 1 steal. No, the Rockies didn't trade him this year when he was at his peak value. And now he has been borderline unplayable for 2 months. Are you holding on to Ryan McMahon?
Reluctantly. the crazy thing is it feels like he's having a good season. Even his home numbers are not that great. 264, 353, 432. That's good. It's not Colorado, of course, field good on the road. He's 232, 318, 390, 708 OPS, and surrounded by a lineup for most part we don't like. They're still hitting him third or fourth. He struck out meekly on 3 pitches last night to end the game. Looked kind of lost at the plate. He's probably been a guy I should have cut in a few leagues. And then it's like every time I think about cutting them, they're at home. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I mean, I have to ride this out. At some point, I'm going to see that 5-3-3-4 box score. And I haven't seen it for it feels like for 5 weeks. So I feel like I'm late on this, Eric. Maybe you can help me pull the cut trigger on McMahon because I feel like I probably should and I haven't done it yet.
Just cut him at the end of this week because he had a full week in Coors. Okay. And so this was the week to be like, I'm going to get some production out of him, or, if you were going to hold him, you were holding him because you wanted the 7 games at Coors. And I cut him in a few places a few weeks ago. So far, in the home games, the 2 home games against Miami, 3 for 9, and a solo home run. So not terrible. We'll see what happens the rest of the Miami series and Baltimore. But, I'm not seeing, unless we get like an otherworldly week from him, it's just been so bad for so long, including Coors starts. And the lineup around him is so bad that like I'm not getting great counting stats because he's getting line drive doubles in Coors. So I just don't see enough to hold on to right now.
Such a depressing lineup. Do you have any hope that Nolan Jones can be useful for the? By the way, I want to mention really quick, after this Baltimore weekend series, they have 9 road games. And then they have 6 home games in a row, Chicago and Arizona. They play 3 at LA. And then the final week of the season, they have 6 straight home games. So I guess that's 12 of their final 15 are at home. I'd like to have some piece of that if anything's going to happen. Nolan Jones is available in a lot of leagues. Is there an underserved Colorado asset that maybe could help us at the end of September?
Michael Toglia.
Oh, okay. I like that.
Still 32% rostered in Yahoo formats. So like Toglia for the rest of this week, then Toglia for that 6-game stretch where they're at home. And that's it.
And also that final series against the Dodgers, man, I bet they're going to have the division wrapped up and they're going to be throwing Javy guys. I mean, they're not going to be taking those games seriously.
Yeah, I could see that happening. We're going to get to some pitchers, but before we do that, I just want to tell you a little bit about some golf. The Tour Championship is here. Watch Scotty Scheffler and more of the top 30 golfers on the PGA Tour face off for the FedEx Cup this week. You can catch it live on NBC, the Golf Channel, and Peacock from Thursday through Sunday. Scott, real quick, I know you are a golfer, but we got some baseball to talk about. But who's your pick? Who's your pick for this tournament?
I mean, Scheffler starts with a 2-shot lead. It sounds pretty good to me. I know he wasn't great last week. And Schauffele, by the way, would like to make a pitch for the Player of the Year. And Scheffler's got the 6 wins in the Masters. He won the Players, but Schauffele has 2 majors. What if Schauffele steals it? It's going to be Scheffler or Schauffele, in part because it's hard to say both those names back to back. They had the great run in the Olympics. I'm going to go Scheffler, but Xander Schauffele is going to be right there at the end too.
Yep. I trust you because I don't know anything about golf.
Which is what we want, by the way. They're the 2 best players in the world. This is basically, this is basically Aaron Judge and Bobby Witt going mano a mano for 4 days. So it's going to love that. East Lake is a great tournament. My good friend Don Port lives in that area and plays that course a lot. And they have a great risk reward 18th hole that ends the tournament. Mm-hmm. So it's one of my favorite venues. It's all the chips are pushed to the middle. Also, end of my fantasy golf league, I have Scheffler. I'm being chased by the Schauffele team. It's one of those things where all the things need to go wrong for me not to win the league because Scheffler won 6 tournaments, but Schauffele won 2 majors. So it's coming down to the final week, and you'll want to definitely tune in for some of the great golf. It's only 30 guys, so there's none of this, no journeyman here. It's only the stars. Yeah. It's always fun.
Fingers crossed for you and your fantasy team.
Thank you.
Let's help other people with their fantasy teams for pitching. 2 hot Oakland A's starters over the last month. Osvaldo Bido is the 34th ranked pitcher on Yahoo, not just starter, pitcher on Yahoo over the last month. JP Sears, 67th over the last month. They both have sub-1 whips. Bido has a 1.17 ERA. Sears has a 2.78 ERA, but they pitch for the A's. They don't have long track records of success. What is your belief in either Osvaldo Bido or JP Sears?
It's really simple. It's schedule driven, as you have in the rundown. They're at Cincinnati. You skip that one. And then they have Seattle. Great draw. They have Detroit at home. Great draw. They have Seattle and Detroit at home, which are great draws. And then Chicago, which, everybody knows how lousy they are. So they're very preferred streamers or maybe stream to own players for that cushy part of the schedule. You can't play them at Cincinnati, and then the 3 matchups are absolute dreams.
Yeah, I love those 3 matchups. I personally would lean more towards Sears than Bido, even though Bido has better stats. I like Sears a little bit more as a pitcher, and I can tie it to some changes. He was in my Mixing It Up column 2 weeks ago, which you can go check out on NBC Sports. He has kind of ditched his sweeper a little bit, which again is nice because he's a lefty. He faces a lot of righties. Sweepers from lefties to righties don't tend to be great pitches. He's leaned into his 4-seam and his changeup more. So I like some of the changes Sears has made. And as you mentioned, you're skipping the Cincinnati start in Cincinnati, and those next 3 starts are great for those 2 guys. Ryan Nelson confirmed in the rotation. Jordan Montgomery to the bullpen. Ryan Nelson, we know
Finally
has been great. Another guy who made a tangible change, leaning into the 4-seam fastball like almost 60% of the time. I mean, it's really helped him. But if we're just talking about the last month, 47th ranked pitcher overall for the last month, 2.56 ERA, 0.85 WHIP, 38 strikeouts in 31 2/3 innings, 2 great starts against the Mets and Giants coming up, and then a tougher start against the Astros. But are you adding Ryan Nelson?
Oh, no, I'm adding him. But if he pitches well in those first 2, I might even pitch him against Houston. It's not the same level of Houston offense that we've grown up with. And there's been some guys dinged up there as well. And the strikeout rate speaks for itself. And Arizona's got a good team, man. And finally, Montgomery's in the bullpen. I actually watched him pitch last night because I had Brandon Pfaadt. We'll talk about him in a second. I needed some Pfaadt runs to not come in, and Montgomery comes in, promptly hits a guy with the bases loaded, then walks the guy with the bases loaded. It's like, oh man, why am I doing this to myself and watching this? Is just painful. But yeah, I'm a believer in Nelson. I think he sticks and produces or pitches well for the rest of the season.
And I gotta say, I will have an article coming out. We're switching kind of pitching articles for the end of the year. I have an article coming out tomorrow morning, Thursday morning, where I look at streaming schedules for the week ahead and try to rank my streaming pickups. I still have Nelson in the top tier of highly recommend, even though it's a 2-start week, Giants, Astros. So even though he does get the Astros, I think the Giants start balances that out. You get a 2-start week of a pitcher who's pitching incredibly well. And so I really like picking up Nelson. We'll get back to some pitchers who are pitching well, but I want to talk about his teammates for a second, because both Brandon Pfaadt and Merrill Kelly have not been good of late. Pfaadt is the 621st ranked pitcher over the last month. He has a 6.04 ERA with a 145 WHIP, 30 strikeouts and 28 in the 3rd innings, which is nice. He gets the Mets next, which is good, but then he gets the Dodgers and the Astros. And since Merrill Kelly has come back, he has a 6.75 ERA with a 156 WHIP, 11 strikeouts in 16 innings. Merrill Kelly gets the Dodgers. Then he gets a pretty good start against the Giants, but then he gets the Rangers and he has to pitch in Coors Field. Are you moving on from either of Brandon Pfaadt or Merrill Kelly?
Yeah, I should have moved on from Pfaadt last night. It was a really tough slate for Tout Wars DFS semifinals, and I had a couple of tickets. Pfaadt, Minaya, some other guys. I went with Pfaadt and watched him pitch. You mentioned the Mets is a good start. They ate his lunch Wednesday. And then what was left of his lunch, Jordan Montgomery, threw it in the trash can by hitting a guy and walking a guy with the bases loaded. Throw the ball over the plate, Jordan Montgomery. So this schedule's horrible. The Mets already got him. The Dodgers and Astros speak for themselves, even though Houston, I just looked it up, 12th in runs scored, but it's still, it's not a plus matchup. And Kelly, he gets some jagged. The Colorado starts in here. Both their stats of these pitchers are really bad right now. I can't play, even though Arizona's a good team. Even the defense kind of, gives me a little bit of the will. I don't trust their infield defense either. With it hurts that they don't have everybody healthy right now. I'm not trusting Pfaadt or Kelly in any format.
Yeah, I've never been a huge Pfaadt believer because he has some really bad righty-lefty splits. I could see using him against the Mets if you're in a deeper format and already have him on your team, because the Mets don't have a ton of left-handed hitters. Obviously, guys like Lindor can do damage.
How dare you besmirch Jesse Winker like that?
Right, Jesse Winker and Brandon Nimmo, the aforementioned Brandon Nimmo. I picked up Merrill Kelly and IL stashed him when he was coming back in a few leagues, and I have moved on. You can question whether he's healthy or not, but the matchups aren't great and the results haven't been great. And if I get burned because he pitches amazingly against the Dodgers or the Rangers, I'm willing to own that. I just don't love that matchup for me. But there are some really good matchups. Talk about the Mets for David Peterson. He is the 68th ranked pitcher in Yahoo formats over the last month. He has a 171 ERA, a 107 whip, 23 strikeouts in 31 and 2/3 innings. The underlying metrics hate him. His Sierra is well over 4, but the results have been good. He gets the White Sox, then he gets the Red Sox on the road, and the Red Sox offense outside of Fenway has not been nearly as impactful. They're kind of like a middle of the pack offense on the road, and they're a much better offense at home. Obviously, Fenway is a nice hitter's park. And then Peterson gets the Blue Jays. Are you willing to pick up Peterson for all those starts, or for you, is it just like you'll throw him against the White Sox and then move on?
I think you already should have picked him up. I'm a believer in Peterson. Go get him.
Okay. Done. All right. Let's talk about the aforementioned Red Sox, because two of their starters have really struggled of late. Kutter Crawford is the 734th ranked pitcher over the last month. It's a 7.30 ERA. It is just a 1.14 whip, but 19 strikeouts in 24 and 2/3 innings. Tanner Houck is the 940th ranked pitcher in Yahoo over the last month. It's a 5.16 ERA, a 148 whip, 21 strikeouts in 29 and 2/3 innings. Are you moving on from either Kutter Crawford or Tanner Houck?
Yeah, in some borderline leagues, I cut Crawford recently, and I wonder that the Red Sox are quasi in the playoff hunt, but not really. I see these guys getting shut down in a couple of weeks.
That could be an option. I mean, Houck and Crawford are both over their career high in innings because they've been kind of like hybrid reliever starters in the past. If the Red Sox do get bumped out of playoff contention, I could see them definitely being, shut down. The Houck thing is interesting because he looked good for 4 innings in his last start, and then things really unraveled for him in the 5th. And again, when you have a pitcher who's he's over 50 innings beyond his career high in innings pitched. And then when you see pitchers like that wear down as games go on, it's easy to wonder, is this guy kind of on fumes a little bit? And so in a given start, he is wearing down. I am more inclined to hold Houck and move on from Crawford. Crawford has more, he's got a better whip, which is making his fantasy value better over the last month, but he has major home run issues. And I just like the next 2 starts. Crawford gets the Blue Jays and Mets, which is fine, but Houck gets the Tigers and Mets. And so obviously I'm comfortable starting Houck in both of those games. Then they both would get the Orioles after that, and then the Yankees after that. We'll see how those 2 starts go, but at this point right now, I can't see pitching Crawford and Houck against the Orioles and Yankees.
And Crawford's FIP, by the way, is 4.73. I mean, I'm never surprised when he pitches great. I'm never surprised when he gets hammered.
He's got major home run issues. It is a legitimate problem that he's dealing with right now.
Big problem.
This guy's only 56% rostered, but people are still holding on to Taj Bradley because he had a really tremendous stretch. He is the 1,022nd ranked pitcher over the last month in Yahoo. It's a 7.96 ERA. It's a 162 whip. His upcoming schedule: versus the Padres, versus the Twins, at the Phillies, at the Guardians. I'm cutting Bradley in all formats. I mean, maybe AL only I'm keeping him, but I can't see starting Bradley against any of those 4 teams. And so why is he on your roster if you're not starting him in those 4 games?
Yeah, and he's not getting deep into games, right? I mean, 5, 4, 4 1/3. Sometimes he gets to 6 innings, so there's not a lot of win equity here either. Taj Bradley's mostly just been a tease this season.
Yep, I agree. I'm just going to have you pick a closer here. We're just talking about, I just looked at these closers under 50% rostered in Yahoo, or guys who are in closer committees. There's 5 names that are readily available out there in Yahoo formats. It's Porter Hodge and Jorge Lopez of the Cubs. It's Justin Martinez of the Diamondbacks. It's Manuel Rodriguez and Edwin Uceta of the Rays. If you were setting like a waiver priority, where are you landing for those closers? Or closer committee guys?
Yeah, Uceta, if all I cared about was ratios, and Lopez, if saves were the biggest driving force, although Martinez also has a case.
Yeah, I would say Martinez if I really needed saves. Uceta if it was ratios for me. Uceta feels like Uceta and Hodge feel like they're both the high leverage guys that are going to get the tough matchups at the end of games, which will leave Lopez and Manuel Rodriguez to pick up saves. Martinez is just the closer right now, but Seawold has been better-ish of late, so he could take that job.
Also mentioned Tanner Scott's been pretty good in San Diego. We'll get an occasional save, and he's somebody who I've been picking up a couple of places just to smooth the ratios out.
Yeah. We're going to quick hit the streamers really quickly. We're not really going to give you analysis. Sorry, people, but we have kind of hit the end here. We hope that we did a lot of work giving you some guys to pick up. I'm going to name 4 pitchers on each of Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Just tell me where you land, Scott, and I'll give you my choices. Friday, you have Jonathan Cannon of the White Sox against the Mets. You have Tyler McGill of the Mets against the White Sox. You have Martin Perez of the Padres against the Rays, and you have John Gray of the Rangers against the Athletics. Where are you going?
McGill first, Perez second.
I have Perez first. I'm not afraid of the Rays lineup, and I think Perez has been better of late. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but yeah, I'll go McGill second, and John Gray I would stream in deeper formats against the A's. Saturday, you've got DJ Hers of the Nationals against the Cubs. You have Chad Bradford of the Cody Bradford. No, Chad Bradford. Cody Bradford. I don't know where I got Chad Bradford from.
You must have just watched Moneyball, I guess.
It must have been. Cody Bradford of the Rangers against the A's. Mason Black of the Giants is scheduled to start against the Marlins, according to Roster Resource. And Matthew Boyd of the Guardians against the Pirates. Where are you going there?
I'm back in on the Boyd Renaissance. Give me Matthew Boyd against Pittsburgh.
It's Bradford for me. I think he's been looking really good, and I like the Oakland start. But Boyd against Pirates, I also like as well. And I can't knock what DJ Hers did against the Braves. I think Hers looks really good. And so, yeah, I'm going to go for him. Just a note here that Zebby Matthews is also available in like almost 80% of Yahoo leagues. He has a start on Saturday. He should definitely be added in far more formats. Lastly, we're going to end it up. Cooper Criswell on Sunday of the Red Sox gets the Tigers. Jameson Taillon of the Cubs gets the Nationals. Andrew Heaney of the Rangers gets the Oakland Athletics, and Mitchell Parker of the Nationals gets the Cubs. Where are you going here?
Yeah, poor Heaney lost the start Tuesday because of that 4-pitch rainout snafu in Chicago. I can't go Criswell because I just think he's not going to have any length. He won't get a win there. So I lean Taillon. I seem to guess wrong on him all the time, but I'm not afraid of this Washington lineup. Heaney would be a close second choice.
Yeah, I lean Heaney, and then I would go Taillon. And if I'm in a really deep format, I could see using Criswell. I'm talking like 15 team leagues because the Tigers don't scare me, but I think you'll be lucky to get 5 out of Criswell is, again, to your point, why he's a little bit of a knock. So again, Thursday over on NBC Sports, check out my streaming pitcher article. It'll give you picks for the week of September 2nd. That's Labor Day. That's next Monday. So we'll help you with your waiver picks for this week, and I'll be doing that every week through the end of the year. You can check Scott and I both out on Twitter. I'm at Samsky NYC. Scott is at Scott_Pianowski. And we'll be back next Wednesday for another episode of the Rotoworld Baseball Show.